Right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our panel today on the discontents that we have towards Western journalism. I'm expecting a robust and exciting conversation. My name is Fatemah Farag. I'm the organizer and moderator of today's panel. I'd like to begin by introducing my fellow panelists, starting on my left with Zahera Harb, who is the Director of Journalism Postgraduate Studies at City St. George University of London and chairperson for the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism at Arish. Ricardo Mir de Francia is the senior international reporter at El Periodico, who spent 6 years in Palestine, in Gaza, and also 10 years as a correspondent in Washington. And of course, last but not least, Shuruq As'ad, who is a Palestinian veteran, Palestinian journalist, and trainer and country director for WAN IFRA's Women in News program in Palestine. Welcome to the panel. Before we begin, we will begin with a moment of silence in recognition of over 170 journalists, Palestinian journalists, who have been killed since the beginning of the war over a year ago. Thank you. Beginning from the moment of pain, I'll start with you, Shuruq. We were just talking about how difficult it is to be Palestinian, because nobody recognizes the pain, nobody recognizes the truth, nobody recognizes the injustice. If you could start us off with what that's like.
Yeah, actually, I left Palestine 3 days ago, and the last vision I received in my heart and mind was the burnt colleague, Ahmad Mansour, who was bombed with other journalists in their tent in Gaza. This is to add on 208 journalists who were killed in Gaza, and 73 media offices bombed, and 1,700, 800 journalists who are displaced. The situation, I think, I've been here last year, and here I am again, asking the same questions and maybe trying to tell to the world that to see us and to see the story, we talk about more than 550 days where our colleagues hardly and bravely delivering the story from inside Gaza. They are our eyes and senses, while Israel banned more than 4,000 foreign press journalists who arrived to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem asking to get inside Gaza, and they were banned, as we are in Jerusalem and Ramallah. And the only questions that I think of, why the story is not seen by international media and by mainstream media, and why Palestinian journalists have always to defend themselves that they are journalists, and why they are dehumanized, why Palestinians are dehumanized, why all the human rights that the foreign world or the international community lectured us for years, we don't see it anymore. I think maybe I will not have answers, but I can say that I am, as a Palestinian journalist, raising the voice of my colleagues inside Gaza and West Bank, full of anger and disappointment, because foreign press, always there was injustice covering the Palestinian issue, but I never thought that we will lose 150,000 Palestinians between killed, injured, missing, 200,000 homes, and still the story is not delivered. Why there was no content or history, that things did not begin in the 7th of October? Why there's vocabulary and human rights is not applied to Palestine? It's a long thing, or we can dig in for hours and hours and hours, but I think we need to know the answer from the international community now, why this is happening.
We'll be coming back to the why, definitely within this panel, but I'd like to stay here on this sense of injustice that we feel with regards to the coverage. And of course, here we are generalizing the mainstream and the overall sort of narrative. We do understand, obviously, that there are exceptions to this. But I remember one of the first conversations we had after the war broke out, Zahera, was about how mainstream Western journalism had already aligned itself to a specific narrative and how that was manifesting. If you can take us back to that time, and what were the main signs that showed us that this was happening, and what did it look like, and how has it progressed?
Thank you, Fatemah. So I'm just going to start from where Shuruq has ended. Basically, one of the main questions that we were kind of like documenting, the fact that where is the context? And that this did not start on October 7. And from day one, we realized that there's something missing in the coverage. And the main aspect of that was the fact that history is not there. The fact that it did not start on October 7. Things has been happening before. The fact that lies that were propagated by Israeli officials were taken as face value. The fact that newspapers in Britain, for instance, went on with the story of beheaded children. It was headlines. And we were like, have you verified it? Like, has anyone actually tried to verify this story? And no one was giving us an answer. It's basically whatever the Israeli narrative was, putting across was taken as face value, no challenge, no questioning. The fact that hate speech against Palestinians were manifested, in every single newspaper. And I have to say that at the beginning, none of the newspapers actually were questioning any of the hate speech. And I just need to stop here and say, what I'm talking about is basically Anglo-American media. So that's where my research is based. None of them, and also broadcasters, except for one case in Britain, which is Channel 4, that tried to do something about it. But still, broadcaster like the BBC, no challenge of hate speech. People were put on air with no legitimacy, Israeli voices, no legitimacy, were going on air actually propagating hate speech against Palestinian as a people. And the journalists sitting in the studio were not questioning or even challenging. They were taking it as fact, as the truth. And I think that's where we started thinking as not just as Arab scholars, Arab media scholars in the UK, but also media scholars in the UK who have some sense of critical approach to, there's something wrong going on here. And we really need to stand up and say something about it. And that's when we basically, we collectively wrote a letter, a petition letter to the, mainly to the BBC, but also to British media, telling them that this has to stop. And I don't want to go, too far in this, but the amount of hate speech we, as media scholars from all backgrounds, Jewish, Arabs, white, British, kind of like Christian, we were all subject to a hate speech campaign because we actually stood up from the beginning. The letter that we wrote were basically the beginning of November 2023. And we said, something is wrong here. And we really need you guys to stand up and think of the kind of practices that you are doing. Just, make sure that whatever you're doing now does not come back and bite you later.
Thank you for that, Zahera. Ricardo, moving to you, and there seems to be this divide, this widening divide. We are saying that mainstream Western journalism is actually not upholding the standards of professional journalism that we've discussed and agreed on forever. And Western journalism is looking at us and saying, no, but this is about verification, this is about balanced reporting, you misunderstand. So what can you tell us about how this imbalanced reporting is manifesting? What are the signs that can tell us that it is there, that it is biased?
Well, thank you, Fatemah, for inviting me. I think, the tragedy of this is that journalism malpractice when dealing with the conflict in Gaza and in Palestine, in Israel, is helping to perpetuate the conflict. And it didn't start on October 7. It has been going on for a long time. It just manifested on a bigger scale right now when everybody is paying attention, right? And so there's certain mechanisms. For example, one of the things that we've seen is this misrepresentation of Palestinians and Palestinian voices in the media. You know, there's been many studies, right? For example, there's one by the George Washington University talking about the Sunday shows in America, which are important on setting the agenda, right? Out of 140 outside guests, there is only one Palestinian. That was for the first 4 months of the war. That's one of the things. Then there is this other the use and abuse of the passive voice, right? In headlines, the passive voice pretty much emphasizes the event, what has happened, but it hides who did it. And you know, there's many examples. I just bring you a few of them, right? For example, there was a headline recently in the New York Times saying a Palestinian director of No Other Land, the documentary, is attacked and detained, witnesses say. Well, attacked and detained by whom? Is it the aliens that came and, you know, and did it? It was the settlers, right? We know that. And it was very clear. There was videos about it. The BBC, Hind Rajab, 6 years old, found dead in Gaza days after phone calls for help. Well, who killed?
He died alone.
He died alone, right? I mean, it was like 354 bullets shot on her car. Or the CNN, at least 20 people killed, dozens wounded in shelling while waiting for food aid. Again, it was an Israeli strike, right? And that has been going on and on and on, in a way, you know, with the purpose to hide the responsibility. There is also the language disparity, and that has been going on through all these months, right? When describing the Israeli victims or what happened on September, October, media has been using things like a massacre, like a bloodthirsty attack, brutal murder, slaughter, atrocity, and it was, fair enough, right? It was a massacre, but that same language is not applied to Palestinians. Palestinians are usually killed, or they die. They die how? They die by COVID. You know, was it an earthquake? You know, and that helps to model the picture. You know, because it seems, well, there's a tragedy going on there, but for people who's not paying attention, who's not following everyday news, that makes it confusing, right? The other thing, there's this constant casting doubt on Palestinian casualties, right? So mostly Anglo-Saxon media, they tend to remember always according to Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza. Well, fair enough. But, you know, international organizations, the WHO, the World Health Organization, has corroborated those figures. And not only during this war, since 2009, the figures that were given by the Ministry of Health in Gaza proved to be pretty much correct. And it happened, and it's been 4 wars since then. The other thing is, okay, if we remind readers and viewers that the Ministry of Health is controlled by Hamas, we should probably remind viewers that the Israeli government is a far-right government. How many times do we say that? How many times do we remind that the Israeli security apparatus is controlled by the settlers, who had an ideology very close to fascism, you know, and that's said by the Israeli media and others, whoever knows the region, you know. So that's the other one. Of course, there is the lack of context, which is really important. This didn't start on October 7th. And you know, it's not, I think context shouldn't be given to excuse what Hamas did. You know, the killing of civilians, that's a war crime. And they should be brought to justice, to courts. But it's very important to know, you know, that Palestinians in Gaza had been living under a crippling blockade for 17 years. the Palestinians all over have been living under a very oppressive military occupation for 57 years. Or that, Palestinians in the West Bank are living under something very close to an apartheid regime, which helps to, to put things in perspective and to understand that, in the beginning, many in the media describe this almost like, suddenly Israel is attacked by these barbarians. Well, the thing is, there was a context. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it should be said so people can understand really what's going on in the region.
So let me stop you there. And, what we're seeing here now seems to be a media that instead of speaking truth to power is actually complicit in hiding accountability and hiding the truth. And in this case, we would consider, I assume, Western media sort of an enabler of the violence that we see every day in Palestine and in Gaza. So the why here, it becomes a go-to, I think, from my perspective, to say because they're racist, because they hate us, because there's that sentiment. But there's also, I think, in a deep diving into this, there's a dynamic here as to how we do the profession, how we do our jobs. That is also a sort of the structure of Western journalism and Western newsrooms that is making this happen, that is facilitating this. What are your thoughts on that? Why is this happening? What is enabling this type of coverage? What is enabling this breach from what we would consider to be, the values of professional journalism? Shuruq, would you like to begin?
I can start and then leave
Yes.
you both speak. I think there has been always a machine of disinformation concerning Palestine. It is a decision. I cannot see it other words, and maybe Zahera can talk more about this. I cannot see it more than disinformation happening for more than 76 years, and generation after generation. And things are not changing. And in my opinion, they refuse to see till now, the international media, that, and again, not all of them, because thank you for every journalist who really stood out and delivered the story. They refused to see that it's not an ethical media that is going on, and they are becoming sort of IDF spokesperson for the Israeli army without any investigation, without any context. And they even became spokespeople for their governments. The political, it's not as we thought that international media can really investigate as they always told us, or they will even give the same time or the same space for Palestinians and for Israelis. What I can say is disinformation, and to be more honest, as a Palestinian and as a Palestinian journalist, maybe I don't want to know why again. Now, I don't want to know why. And
which means you've reached the point where you feel it is no longer.
Yeah, it's for me what happened in Palestine, this big genocide where Palestinians are not human beings, have no names, have no pictures, have no loved ones, have no dreams, have no families. And in the other part, if those pictures were put, if an Israeli journalist, and I don't wish this for any journalist in the world, will be burnt in his tent while doing his work, or a Ukrainian journalist, things would have been different. I cannot really, I don't want to know why. I told you again, they have now to tell me why this is happening. But I think it's still a machine of decision, of disinformation that has been going on for years. For me, as a third generation of refugees, this is a genocide, this is military occupation going on for years, and we have a right to be safe and to have dignity like any other person, and my life as a journalist and as a Palestinian is equal to any other life in this world, and we have right to resist. putting things in context is very, very important. That is missing in all the international media.
Of course. And before I move on to you, Zahera, I want to stop at Ricardo because we were talking about this. Bring us to the Western newsroom and talk to us about also the pressures and the price that needs to be paid, how difficult it is, perhaps, to be able to do the right thing.
Well, I mean, we've seen it in some big media, right? How some of them had to resign because they were not able to tell the story the way they saw it. Some were actually laid fire for they posted in social media sympathizing with Palestinians and what was happening in Gaza. I mean, it's not easy. And you always, you are aware that if you are writing certain things, well, the Israelis might not allow you to come back into the country to cover the conflict, which is always, you know, it's difficult for people who have been dedicating their lives to covering this conflict or spending many years. And then I think, you know, the why this is done, I think it has very concrete consequences in the sense that, you know, for example, one way to say it is, you know, what Chomsky called manufacturing consent, right? I mean, it allows Israel to continue this genocidal war for 16 months. It also dehumanizes Palestinians. And one very clear example was at the beginning of the war when some of the media published this lie about the beheaded babies, 40 beheaded babies, or even the roasted babies in the oven, right? Yeah. I mean, who's gonna show any empathy for people who are burning babies in the oven, who are beheading babies? And I think that was the consequence, one of the consequences, that in the beginning, at the very beginning of the assault, part of the Western world said, fuck, these people are crazy. How are we gonna sympathize with these people, right? And it goes on and on, you know. Again, it also reinforces this narrative that the Israelis are the victims here, which I don't think is the case. Obviously, we shouldn't get into this who is more of a victim, because both sides have victims. It's been a very long conflict. But I think it should be recognized that there are some factors that make this conflict eternal, which is, you know, you cannot, you know, military occupation is illegal. Keeping people under the military boot without being able to develop themselves, have a normal life, of course, is gonna bring resistance. It's gonna bring, you know, it's gonna bring violence, because it's not the Palestinians who go every night into the Israeli homes and arrest people and sometimes kill people. No, it's the other way around. Every day, these Palestinians have to stand and, you know, see how the Israeli military decides everything about their lives, takes their children to jail, you know, storms their homes. And this is every single day, every single night.
But that's not the narrative that we see, and that's why the narrative of the Israeli narrative is so powerful, because it's not countered. I mean, so we have seen violence against Israelis, and this has impacted Western ability to empathize with the Palestinians. But we see so much violence against Palestinians, and yet that never, you know, prompts, because maybe we don't see it as we should, because Western journalism isn't doing its job. Why, Zahera?
Wow, that's a very like easy question for me. But I just want to start, there's so many layers to this, and one is political. One, what Shuruq mentioned, the power of Israeli PR machine, the power of the Friends of Israel lobbies across Western capitals, and that is not like a conspiracy theory. It was documented in a very substantial research study that was published in 2 books done by Glasgow Media Unit. One is called Bad News from Israel, and the other one is called More Bad News from Israel. And it's basically telling us why American and British journalism is falling for the Israeli narrative in basically putting the or reporting the conflict. The other thing that I've come across, and it's not just with the war now, and we're talking about the war on Gaza because of the genocidal campaign, but even with the war on Lebanon and the recent war on Lebanon, there is a pattern within Anglo-American journalism, and I wrote about this in 2017 basically, and I call it when Orientalism is manifested in news practices. The basic understanding that we, Arabs, Palestinian, Lebanese, just count them, we do not actually have the same kind of ability to analyze, to report as journalists. We're always short of the professionalism of Western journalism. We're always short. We're always seen as fixers, as people that need to be taught how to do journalism, people that need to learn how to be objective and balanced and impartial. While I think it's, I don't want to kind of like sound, horrible here, but the supremacy in the fact that we are actually lesser kind of journalists. And also I think we've seen it with journalism in other parts of the global south. That supremacy of journalism, of the Western-centric ideology in journalism, has completely manifested itself throughout time. And it didn't just start on October 7, basically. So this whole, kind of like stereotypical ideas that some of these journalists hold because of the way they were raised. And we all know that actually also affects the way they cover. So that also plays a role in why we are seeing what we are seeing now. And I always tell my students, you really need always to put yourself in the shoes of others. And the other thing that I always, and I only realized it when I came to Britain 23 years ago, is the fact that our understanding of the history of what happened to Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel is totally different to the European understanding of history and the European understanding of why Israel was created. So for us, and it's as simple as, for us, it's a Nakba, it's a catastrophe. For the European, like collective memory of the outcome of the Second World War, that's actually a good project for, supporting victims of Nazism, of, victims of the Second World War. So basically, I understand the history in a way that is completely different to a European mindset of how they understand the history of what happened to Palestine. Or the idea that, when I talk about, the historic land of Palestine, it actually doesn't manifest the same way when you basically talk to a European journalist and they think, oh, that's, you mean Israel.
Yeah. I think if there's one thing that we should all be able to agree on is this idea of the supremacy of Western journalism is done, and that the playing field has definitely been leveled. Yes.
I think it's not just done. This is actually one of the themes of this topic that we're talking about. Arab journalists now feel that don't come and teach us professionalism anymore. Definitely. Your professionalism has been put to the test and it failed, and it failed big time. So basically, this is where we're talking about discontent. And I always say, like, all these, media development, organizations that are based in the West has put millions of dollars and pounds in the region to basically train Arab journalists to become professional, to be able actually to hold professional values. that is all gone down the drain, simply because Arab journalists now feel like, you know what, when it came to the test, you all failed us.
Yes.
And there's nothing about, nothing professional about the way that you are now covering Gaza, and nothing professional about the way that you actually also covered Lebanon in the last few months. So, I think now we're going into a different era of how journalism, one of my old professors used to say, we should start thinking about journalisms rather than journalism.
Which, yes, please.
About this superiority and so on, because also I've been working in training and with several programs. The thing that I've been entering discussions like, okay, now we talk about gender, but please don't talk about sexual harassment in the Israeli jails towards Palestinians. Talk about it in Ramallah, in the society of Ramallah. We talk about human rights, okay, but no need to talk about occupation and ban of movement and humiliation and so on. It's all those programs of, as if they have the right that they can teach us about this human right thing, but they don't want it in the context because they don't want to have a step towards changing this context, that they have been partners in all of it till now. And sometimes I used to ask myself, maybe because I'm not blonde, maybe white, colored eye, so maybe they don't really sympathize with me. Maybe if I have a different stereotype of what Netanyahu and the West were they fell in the same narrative of as if those Arab savages colored Muslims towards vis-a-vis the civilization, between brackets.
I think sometimes, perhaps as bad as it gets, sometimes it allows for clarity that we no longer have to uphold things that actually were not true anymore.
Yeah.
And so that, is something that we should capture, I think, in moving forward. I'd like to open up to the floor. I'm sure that there are questions and comments. I'll do that for 5-6 minutes and then come back so that we can have final comments. And I'd also like us to reflect on the fact that how this impacts, Western journalism moving forward. It's not just about us, but I think it's how the profession will develop. So opening up to the floor, and I see Rowan Domen.
Thank you very much, Rowan Damen from Arij, Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. I think it's great to have great knowledgeable experts on this panel. Thank you, Fatemah, for doing a great moderation job in a very difficult topic. I think we all need to think these days of journalists rather than journalism and journalisms and newsrooms, because there has been excellent journalists from the West covering this topic. Jewish journalists, Christian journalists, Muslim journalists who has been great covering this topic in different languages, and maybe they were not allowed to do it within the traditional newsrooms. And there has been horrible Zionist Arab journalists, including some of the Palestinian corrupted authority that has been covering this issue. So it's not a binary between the West and the East. I think it's a binary between Zionists and anti-Zionists. And this is why I think we need to look where we can have common language between people who really believe on factual and truth in different languages and make this happen. And for people who didn't believe in the history of Palestine of 1948, today they are watching what's happening with the genocide. We don't need to agree on the narrative of the history if the genocide is happening today. Thank you.
Would anyone like to respond to that?
I'm not sure. I would necessarily frame it between Zionist and anti-Zionist. I mean, I think we journalists have to look at the reality, try to understand the reality, and transmit, project, and tell, project it in an accurate way, right? In a fair way. It doesn't matter what are our views. We have to explain what is the reality on the ground without contaminating ourselves by the propaganda. Most, on both sides, it happens on both sides, but the reality is one, and that's what we should do. I mean, we should pay attention to the facts, much more than what the government people say. I mean, one of the most obscene things in this coverage at the beginning was to see the IDF spokesperson all the time at the BBC, at the CNN, in CNBC. I mean, these people have a very bad track record. They lie as almost as a means of living. They spin things, and they were all the time there. I mean, by the same token, you should have put the Hamas spokespeople all the time there. But that wouldn't help. I mean, what helps is to be honest and try to reflect reality, and that's why journalists spend time in the region. And I think we should change that. Another thing is we should pay attention to international law. Humanitarian law, when we cover armed conflict, well, those are the basic rules, right? So forced displacement is illegal. Bombing refugee camps is illegal. Destroying the Palestinian health system, those are war crimes and crimes against humanity. And by not calling that out sufficiently, we've helped to normalize this extreme violence that is going on and on and on.
I totally agree with you, Rawan. The point is we're talking about mainstream media. We're not talking about independent media. And we're also talking about Arab audiences. And one thing that I always now tell my students is the fact that you don't now just actually report to your own audiences within your own borders. Anything that you write, anything that you broadcast will actually go across border. So the Arab audiences have actually been following what this mainstream media has been covering. And this is where the discontent is, basically. I totally agree we shouldn't be generalizing. There's so much work that has been done by brave journalists, independent, small media ventures, and that has also been recognized within Arab audiences. So Democracy Now!, for instance, is one of the places where people go to now, to even within the Arab region. Again, we're also talking about literate audiences. When you talk about Arab audiences, you're not talking about audiences who don't speak languages, who don't actually have access to technology, who cannot actually go and pick up the news sources they want to pick. So as a journalist, you always need to think that whatever you write, whatever you report, it's going to go beyond your target audience.
There's one point, though, I want to sort of focus, is that we do need to think about how to amplify those independent voices to counter the mainstream narrative, definitely. And I think that's part of the action points that we could take away from this conversation. I can take one more question. Yes. Okay. I'm getting this type of a sign from. So one brief question, please.
Very quick, because I just was at.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, my name is Bisan Zarzar. I'm a Palestinian journalist, but I work for the Dutch newspaper called Trouw. My question is about the fact check and how important is it, because we hear it a lot, like we need to fact check and we need to show people the truth of the matter, but at the same time we see that platforms like Meta, for example, where a lot of people are taking their information from, is banning the fact check. So what do we need as journalists to improve and counter these kind of narratives if the fact check is not taken into account, and sometimes being biased at the newsroom when I present a fact, but they don't want to use it. So how should we deal with this?
Okay, in answering this question, if I could ask each of you also to give us your closing remark, what you want to leave everyone here in the audience with from this conversation. So who would like to begin?
I don't have answer, because this is our battle, actually, daily battle. But I believe that we have to keep going on, because we don't have any other choice, actually. I want to close maybe with, again, saying that we are now talking while children, colleagues, doctors, teachers are dying in Gaza. This did not stop, and we're still talking why it's not covered. And this is, for me, seriously, I cannot understand it. And I still wish, I want to thank every journalist in the world who stood up. And this is because it really meant a lot. And I want to say that this genocide and attack, it's not on Palestinians or Palestinian journalism scene, or it is really on humanity, and we will all pay the price if we did not stand, not for Palestine, stand, as I said last year, and I repeat it, with our beliefs we fought for years in all fields, yani, ethically, about being a human being. And anybody who did not stand, and unethical journalists especially, in my opinion, they are part of this genocide that is still going on. And I call here from this conference also for accountability. Every soldier and every Israeli politician and every person in the world who was part of this, of the killing that is happening, there has to be accountability if we want, let's say, to be fine as human beings.
Yeah. Just quickly to answer the fact-checking question, we have the Arab Fact-Checker Network. They're doing an amazing job, not because I'm the chair of the organization, but they're really doing an amazing job. And I think the Gaza war had proved that they're now used by, news organizations and fact-checkers across the globe, basically, to fact-check stories that are coming and related to the coverage of Gaza. You go and tell your editor that, I have a fact, I verified it, they don't want to take it, that's political, that's not editorial. So for us to basically realize as journalists that decision is actually made on a political level rather than on editorial level. So don't let them tell you it's editorially not justified. It's justified, but it's a political decision. And I think once we realize that these decisions are made on a political level, we will get to the point where later on they will have actually to answer to those positions that they have made within the newsroom. I just want to add my voice to Shuruq and basically say that accountability is extremely important. And I think journalists who don't stand up now in support to their fellow journalists in Palestine, Rawan said it yesterday, it's coming to us. So what's happening to Palestinian journalists now is not just happening to Palestinian journalists. It's something that is going basically to hunt us all at one point in history. So stand up and support Palestinian journalists.
Yeah, so very briefly, I think we have to look ourselves in the mirror and recognize that we have become part of the problem, that the media, the way we're covering the conflict, is just helping to perpetuate the conflict, and that translates into thousands and millions of people whose lives are becoming miserable or are being destroyed. So we definitely have to do a better job. Otherwise, there won't be a solution. Until we don't start calling things by the name, there will not be a solution. And as my colleague said, I think this is a symptom of the sort of moral collapse we are witnessing of the West. And it's going to have repercussions, because now in America they're starting to deport pro-Palestinian students. But who will be next? Would it be the gay? Would it be the leftists? Would it be who? So we need to do a better job, and we need to be aware that there is much more at stake than the situation in Palestine, which is horrific, by the way. So it's time to stand up and demand a better job by our media.
Thank you. So I think we walk away all thinking we must stand up for our humanity. The time is upon us to do so. Thank you very much to our panelists. Please join me in thanking them.